You all know who Dracula is, right? The vampire? Big, tall, pale thing. I actually don't know what he... Does he look a bit like Aiden Ross? Who is...
I'll tell you about TikTok.
Oh, apparently he looks like... What's this guy's name again? Who is this? I can't remember his name. Evildoer. What? Where am I? Villains Wiki. Whoa, brother. It's quite a bit of padding, surely, in here. Superhuman strength, superhuman speed, superhuman agility, superhuman reflexes, superhuman stamina, superhuman durability, superhuman endurance. Oh, hang on. This is a bit of padding, isn't it? What the f***? It's like when you type in, I made sandwiches for the poor in year 9 on your resume. Nicolas Cage. Anyway, I believe Dracula is Nicolas Cage or something. I don't remember. I've completely lost track of where I was. Dracula is based off somebody from real life, not Nicolas Cage. He was based off of a real historical figure from the 1400s, and I want to talk to you about him because his story is like something out of Game of Thrones, but in real life. It's insane. It's medieval Europe, specifically the Balkans, incarnate. It's incredible. So, to explain the story, I want you to cast your mind back to the 15th century in the Balkans. Now I've got your attention, don't I? At this time, it was owned by various large powers, mainly the Ottomans, or the Turks as they were called, and Hungary and Austria and those European guys up in the north. And right between them, there's this little state, a buffer zone, if you will, called the Principality of Wallachia. That is where our story takes place today. It is part of what is now Romania. In fact, Romania's capital, Bucharest, is in Wallachia. So, you know, it's f***ing Romania. Just deal with it. Dracula was born somewhere between 1428 and 1431. We actually don't know. Get used to that. That's just medieval storytelling. A lot of dates, and even historical events themselves at this time, are a lot of just... Now, he was born to one Vlad II Dracula. And this is where we get the name from, because son of Dracula is Dracula. Now, he got the name Dracula, which means dragon, for being part of this cool club called the Order of the Dragon. The Order of the Dragon was established by European powers as a way to fight back against the Turks, because the Turks were doing what the Turks do best, invade Europe. So, Vlad II is the current Prince of Wallachia, or... What the f*** is that?
Voivode or voivode. Voivode or voivode. Voivode or voivode.
He was the Prince of Wallachia, okay? I'm not going to use that word. I'm going to avoid saying a lot of words in this video because I don't want to attract them to my house. I have a lot of possessions I don't want stolen, okay? His real name was Vlad. Literally, get used to that. It doesn't end ever. And Vlad had a few brothers. An older brother who was like a monk, didn't want to be involved in politics at all, and...
Editor's note, this is completely incorrect. He was actually prince for a while and was murdered later.
And Radu. He's a guy who comes up and is important later. That's the only reason I'm bringing him up. Now, Vlad II was a bit sketchy guy. So the Ottomans had Radu and Vlad III, our guy, sent to prison as collateral in the Ottoman Empire, in case, you know, Vlad II got all handsy and did something he wasn't supposed to do, like support an invasion of the Ottoman Empire. Why would he do that? He did that immediately. Now, he very much expected his children to be slaughtered here. He was absolutely fine with that, though, because he was going to help the King of Poland, Vlad Islaus, invade the Ottoman Empire. So he just condemned his children to death. But they didn't get killed. Otherwise, the story would have ended right now and there would be no point in even discussing the guy. This guy was born and then he was murdered by the Ottomans. Dracula actually managed to learn fluent Turkish while he was in jail, which is very important for later because him and Turkey aren't always on the best of terms. Now, Vlad II quickly learned his lesson and immediately backed out Poland and bent the knee to the Ottoman Empire once again, which we think is why Vlad III and Radu got released. We actually don't know when they were released, but eventually they got out of jail. This Transylvanian guy named John Hyundai, it's not Hyundai, John Hunyadi. I'm gonna keep calling him Hyundai, because I can. See, Mr. Hyundai didn't like this whole, ooh, let's be friendly with the Ottomans thing. So he organised a coup, as happens all the time, to install Vlad. Islav, that's different. It's different. This name will haunt my dreams. So Vladislav comes in, kicks Dracula off the throne, and then kills him, I think. Does he kill him? I don't remember. Now, Vladislav doesn't actually really have a right to rule. If anything, it should be our boy Vlad III. So Vlad III, Dracula, is like, hey, I should be the king. Hey, Ottoman Empire, do you want to make me the king? And the Ottoman Empire went, who gives a shit? Where is Wallachia? Fuck it, take Wallachia, I don't give a shit. And so while Vladislav is invading the Ottomans, Vlad III does a little sneaky run around and takes power in Wallachia for 2 months before Vladislav came back, and he was immediately ousted. Thus concludes Vlad's reign as prince. His first reign. You see, Dracula wasn't killed, he left. Sensibly, and went all over Europe. He went and spent some time in Turkey and hung out. Then he went over to Moldova because his uncle was the ruler. Bogdan. What a f***ing name. This is so Balkan. Bogdan has a son, Stephen, of course, Vlad's cousin. And these guys are all hanging out and they're having a great time, and then Bogdan is brutally assassinated, like happens every 5 minutes in Balkan history. So after Bogdan gets assassinated, Vlad and Stephen have to flee across the border into Hungary. Now, if you don't remember, Hungary is where John Hyundai is from. I gotta stop calling him Hyundai. His name is Hunyadi. Bit tense, isn't it? Well, not really, because politics is and always has been a game, if anything. You see, Vlad III was only kicked out by John because Vladislav was more useful than him. But things have changed in 1456. You see, way back in 1448, there was a battle in Kosovo. At the Battle of Kosovo, John Hyundai rings up Vladislav, the guy he put in power, and says, hey, favour, right? I know I put you in power, but I'm getting beaten up in this battle. Can you help? What a prick. I mean, how ungrateful can you get? This guy put you in power, and you don't even have the common decency to go lend him a hand. And so by the time John Hyundai got back, he decided, well, you see these 2 villages that you own? They're mine now. And Vladislav said, oh, really? I'm gonna put a blockade around this town. And then Vladislav took it just a step too far and burned down a bunch of villages in Hungary because I guess he could. I don't know. People are stupid, man. The guy probably couldn't f***ing read. It's the 1400s. Mr. Hyundai looks at the situation and goes, well, Vladislav's kind of an asshole, and I don't really want him to be in power anymore. And then suddenly, who turns up in his lap? A pretender! Oh, great! And so he concocts a plan in his brain and goes, hey, Vlad III, would you fancy being Prince of Wallachia? He said, I did. And then you kicked me out of power, you c***. So John Hunyadi, the man who overthrew Dracula, sends Dracula in to overthrow the guy he overthrew Dracula with. So in goes Dracula, and he fights a bunch of Vladislav's armies, and he actually ends up, this is a true story, according to historical record, this happened. He ends up fighting Vladislav's army, Dracula's army, and they go, stop, we're gonna have a duel. So they both had a duel, hand-to-hand combat over who would be the next prince, to the death. And Dracula won, slaying Vladislav II right there on the battlefield, settling the dispute and making him Prince of Wallachia. How f***ing cool is that? Dracula, the actual badass, went up to the prince and said, "F***ing fight me for that." Fought him, beat him, became the new prince in 1456. And so Vlad III comes in for his second reign, and his most important reign, the one that we'll spend the most time on. Upon becoming prince, he immediately began doing what he's remembered for. Killing folk. He immediately began wiping out aristocrats that weren't loyal to him. There's a story of him locking a... Vlad had a disdain for beggars. He thought that they were essentially thieves that was living off the back of working men, right? Yeah, I guess I can see that. I guess that's fair. Well, hold that thought. He then organised this big feast for them. Said, all the beggars of wherever the f*** we are, right? These unpronounceable town names, literally unpronounceable. You guys all come into this big dining hall. Made of wood. I'm sure you can guess where this is going. He locked them all in there and set the fucker alight. He cooked everyone! God fucking damn it. I recorded about 20 more minutes of me just rattling off facts. You know, just talking about Dracula. And it's all gone. It's all gone. Where were we? He just burned a bunch of beggars to death, I believe.
Experimente.
That was one of his forms of collective punishment, but he had plenty. His favourite, and the one he's remembered for so fondly, impaling. So how impaling would work, at least if you were Vlad, is you would take a stake, pointy end, make sure the end isn't too pointy, otherwise it won't hurt as much, and then lay it flat like this, and put the person on the end of it, ass first, or often ass first. And then we tie a horse to you, and allow that horse to drag you backwards onto the stake. And when you had been sufficiently impaled, they'd stand the fucker up and let gravity do the rest. So that's pretty cool. So while he's impaling all these aristocrats and people he just doesn't really fancy that much, Hungary is in disarray. Remember Mr. Hyundai? Well, he's dead. Rest in peace, Hyundai. I will miss you. Hyundai dies, and he is succeeded by Ladislaus Hyundai. It's so close. It's literally one letter off. Now, Ladislaus takes the throne and is immediately executed. He's immediately executed by the king of Hungary, Ladislaus. So Ladislaus king kills Ladislaus Hyundai because he wasn't very popular. And this act immediately makes the king not very popular. So after the execution, Ladislaus Hyundai's uncle and mum, these guys, I'm not even going to try to... Mike and Liz begin organising a civil war in Hungary. Obviously. So while all this civil war shit is going on in Hungary, Dracula gets an idea. He decides to go and visit an old friend. Remember Stephen? Son of Bogdan? Cousin of Dracula? Rightful heir to Moldova, which is currently being run by Mr. Two First Names? That's right. They're getting some payback! Dracula and Stephen joint invade Moldova and kick Peter Aaron off the throne and manage to put Stephen back on his rightful seat. Dracula is a good friend. So anyway, civil war in Hungary's going on. Ladislaus king dies just cause it happens. It's the 1400s, man. People just drop dead. Unless somebody is literally stabbed to death in front of you, it's really hard to tell how they died, to be honest. And with that, Mike and Liz claim victory, and they go to the council that elects the new king, because their king is elected in Hungary, and they recommend this young kid named Matthias Corvinus. He is too young to rule and needs a regent. Oh, isn't that convenient? I'm a bloody adult. I'm an adult. I know how to rule. Just let me be the regent. So Dracula has just put Stephen back on the throne in Moldova. He's feeling good, but he's forgotten that he has to pay the Turkish money every whatever. So the Turkish, having not received a payment, send a few envoys over and go, "Hey, Dracula, you owe us money, remember? You're a tributary state." And Dracula, upon the envoy entering his palace, asks them kindly to remove their headwear. Now, Turkish people are Muslim, especially the Ottoman Empire, very Islamic. So they all have turbans on. One thing you don't do is take a turban off. So when Dracula expected them to remove their headwear out of respect, and they didn't, he nailed their turbans to their f***ing heads. There's a reason they don't call him Vlad the Diplomat. He was incapable of diplomacy. I don't think you could have made a worse decision. You know, I mean, other than just mass executing all of them. So after nailing all the turbans to the heads of this envoy and sending them back, the Ottomans were understandably a little bit a little bit annoyed by that act. It's kind of a dog move, you know. So the Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, which is a hugely significant event for Western European history, Mehmed sends in this local bey, which is basically like a count, named Hamza Pasha, to go and claim the money, right? To go and get the rent money. But in reality, he was coming with the baseball bat to break the kneecaps. Secretly, Hamza was really there to arrest Vlad, take him back to Turkey, and lock him up in prison. Been there, done that, Vlad said, because he already knew the plan was happening before it went down. So he knew where Hamza was gonna be, and he had an army, and Hamza didn't have a full army, so he used his full army to murder Hamza and his entire envoy. I mean, that's one way to start a war, I guess. So Dracula set off throughout Ottoman Europe and pillaged and pillaged and pillaged and raped and killed. 6,000 here, 1,400 here, 1,100 here. Dead, dead, dead. And what did he do with these dead people? Boom, 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 boom. He impaled 24,000 Turkish people in the name of God. That was his justification for everything. I'm doing it for Christendom. And the Pope loved it. But everybody else in Europe didn't really get around him because he was clinically insane. But he did manage to gain some tacit approval from Matthias Corvinus in Hungary. Now remember how I said he spoke fluent Turkish? That's where this comes in. Because what he would do is he would go up to fortresses that were run by the Turks, just him, Vlad. He would go up and tell them in fluent Turkish, open the gates. And they would go, we're in fucking Bulgaria. Who here speaks Turkish? And so they would open up the gates and all of Dracula's men would come in and slaughter and impale them. Now, all things considered, Mehmed was not thrilled with what was going on because he was sending army after army in there and they were all just being fought off and swatted away. So he went, righto, I'm going to end this, and assembled an army equal in strength to the one he used to capitulate the Byzantine Empire. 150,000 Turks descended upon Vlad. And what did Vlad have? Child soldiers! That's all he had. He had 30,000 people that he conscripted. And some of them had armor. A couple of them had some weapons too. There were people with just daggers, right? It was not a professional army at all. And so when you have an army of 30,000 and you have to fight an army of 150,000, what do? Scorched earth, son! He began withdrawing into Wallachia, burning everything down in his wake. Mehmed was set on the capital. Targa Vista? Is that what that says? Mehmed II immediately beelines for that, and the whole way there he's getting hit and run tactics, right? And every village he passes through, all the people evacuated, all the animals slaughtered or let free, the water has been poisoned. He would use biological warfare, right? He would send people infected with the plague into the Turkish army. And apparently it worked sometimes. Now, something I forgot to mention earlier, actually, was in this 150,000 strong Turkish army was a cavalry detachment that was led by Radu. Remember? From all the way back in Turkish prison days? That's Vlad's brother. The Sultan planned to put Radu on the throne instead of Vlad III. Vlad's brother, the man he went to prison with in Turkey. He was going to be the one to overthrow Dracula. So the Turkish army goes into camp, just outside of that place. And while encamped, Dracula gets an idea. Dracula organizes an attack on the camp. And during this attack, he planned to send a little detachment into the tent of the Sultan to kill him right there and then. And I tell you what, they almost did it. In fact, they did. They got into the tent and they found 2 random flogs. They did not find the Sultan. The Sultan's tent was the next one over or something. I don't know. Now, by the morning, the entire Wallachian army had to retreat because, again, 30,000 v 150,000, it's sort of outnumbered. So as they withdrew, they went into the mountains outside the city and allowed the Turks in. And when the Turks got in, what did they find? The impaled corpses of Hamza Pasha and that first detachment that was sent all those years ago. Now, did that happen? It happened literally a year ago. So their corpses were probably just bones by then. Look, this probably didn't happen. And Mehmed, at the sight of all of this and almost getting assassinated the night before, understandably decided to turn around and leave. And they withdrew to the town of Bralia?
Huh?
Yeah, or Braila.
Damn.
Now, this whole time, Dracula has been trying to make deals with Matthias Corvinus, the king of Hungary, the guy that Mike put on the fucking throne. And this whole time, Matthias has kind of just been sitting there going, yeah, man.
Help me!
Yeah, whatever you say, let's do it. Sure, bro. Yeah, no, I'll be down there. I'll help out. And he never did. He never sent a single detachment. And while Dracula was sitting in Transylvania, reorganizing to come back to fight back his throne, because Radu had come in and taken it off him in the meantime, he was arrested by Hungarians. Matthias Corvinus had him arrested in order to avoid a larger war with the Ottoman Empire. Why would he do that? Don't Europeans hate anything Islamic?
Watching SpongeBob and Scooby-Doo.
Well, that's true, because they were all very devout Catholics and these Muslims had taken over a lot of Europe. But Corvinus wanted another title more. He wanted to be Holy Roman Emperor. And I guess he couldn't do two things at once. So to avoid fighting the Ottomans a bunch, he had Vlad arrested and allowed Radu to come in and seize the throne from his brother. Now, what happened in the aftermath of this? Well, Vlad was taken to a prison in Hungary, and he kind of was a bit grumpy, fair enough about the whole thing, and his brother Radu was ruling Wallachia. And we don't really know much about what he did during this time in prison, but we do know he kind of made a good impression on Matthias. Remember, Matthias didn't do this out of personal hatred or anything. He didn't dislike Dracula. He just wanted to not fight Ottomans anymore, and Dracula really liked fighting Turkish people and putting them on big wooden sticks. So he had to go. Didn't have to die. He just had to not be in power. And in fact, he got so chummy with Matthias that he married into the Hungarian royal family and had a couple of kids. Mircea, and Vlad. Because, of course, why the f*** wouldn't it be Vlad? Now, we're going to skip to 1475. At some point between 1462 and 1475, Vlad is released from prison. We don't know exactly when, but he is at some point, because by 1475, he needs to be out of prison because Radu is dead! His brother, the man who stole his throne from him, dies. So who takes the throne now? Well, it's Basarab surname. This guy was liked by the local boyars of Wallachia, but most of the people in the area didn't like him so much because he was a bit of an Ottoman puppet. The thing that got Vlad II. Remember him from fucking 20 minutes ago, whatever the fuck it was? So a couple of important people got together. Stephen III of Moldova and Stephen V of... There's like 3 names in the Balkan. It's Stephen again. Anyway, there's another Stephen. He's a local military commander in Transylvania, right? Similar to the Hyundais from all that time ago. Stephen and Stephen decide, we want this guy out of power, and they start fighting Basarab. Now, Basarab, in response to all this, flees to the Ottomans for help, naturally. Now, staring at an empty throne, Steve and Steve go, well, who's gonna fill it? And they look to Matthias, and Matthias goes, oh shit, I think I've got a spare Vlad somewhere. Vlad III comes back into Wallachia and is kind of the prince. Not officially crowned, but is kind of prince once again. Mehmed II, who is still Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, goes, not a fucking again with this Wallachia bullshit, and sends Basarab back in there with an actual army and says, go beat this guy, he's not that impressive. Now, in November of 1476, they finally push Basarab fully out of Wallachia and can go, all right, Vlad, welcome back, you're the prince again. And they crown him Prince of Wallachia for the 3rd time. However, once again, this reign just doesn't last too long, as he ends up being cornered and killed at some point. We don't know anything about how he died. What, you think we were going to know how he died? We don't even know how he was born. All we know is he's dead. At least by January. The generally accepted theory is that he was, surrounded and killed in battle near a town called Snagov, or whatever the fuck. dark that is. He could have been killed by insiders. He could have been, wiped out by the boyars again. We actually don't know. We don't know where his corpse is. If we knew where his corpse is, that would help a lot. It's assumed he was probably buried at Snagov, if that's actually where he died. He was probably buried at a local monastery there. Or he could have been buried at the monastery of Kamana, which is one he established during his reign as a sign of respect, I guess. We don't know. However, here's a fun little story. Archaeologists actually discovered a casket covered with a purple shroud embroidered with gold at Snagov. The skeleton was covered with fragments of a faded silk brocade, which looks similar to something Vlad was depicted in an oil painting. He also had a crown with turquoise stones and a ring similar to ones worn by members of the Order of the Dragon. This corpse was then donated to the Bucharest History Museum, where it promptly disappeared.
Yeah, that's just disgusting.
How do you lose that? Like somebody comes up to you with a box the size of a f***ing person, and goes, "Don't lose this, it might be Vlad the Impaler." And then you go, "Got it." Fuck, where did I put that corpse? Just put it on a shelf somewhere. Anyway, this potentially corpse of fucking Vlad vanished. And we'll never know if it really was him, because guess where this corpse was uncovered? At Snagov, where everyone thinks he died! Now, this could have just been another local Wallachian royal. Well, he looked like an oil painting of Vlad at the time. Well, I mean, royal fashion's pretty ubiquitous. If we could see his face, we'd know. But it's just a skull. So, technically, that's where his story ends. But, as we all know, his name means a whole new thing now. When I say Dracula, you don't think, oh yeah, Vlad the Impaler, Prince of Wallachia 3 times over. You think of the tall, thin, white thing that eats blood, right? You think of that guy from the movie. The other one, Edward Snowden. Was it Edward Snowden? It was Edward. I'm talking about Twilight. Okay, I just remembered the name of the film. You think of that when I say Dracula, right? Because back in 1897, some guy named Bram Stoker, wow, what a name, just used it as the name for his vampire. Actually, I was doing some research into vampires. Fun fact here. To identify a vampire, they would lead a virgin boy on a virgin horse, and it had to be a black horse, through a cemetery, and if the horse balked, then the corpse in that grave was a vampire. Listen to this. This is how they used to generate vampires. Anything, not just people, anything could become a vampire if a dog jumped over its corpse or if its wounds weren't treated with boiling water. What the fuck? In the short of it, right, Dracula, no matter which story you're telling, whether it's the vampire or Vlad, was fucked. I've almost certainly gotten some things wrong here, right? So go look into him. He's a very fascinating character. You can piss off now. Actually, before you piss off, subscribe. And before you subscribe, go check out my real channel where I do real things, called Tommy and Grommy. I make sketches. I make really cool sketches with my friend, and I think they're funny, and I think you should check it out because it's far more impressive than this. Anyway, that'll do.